Previously on Clash Course. Did you really think that I was going to try to prove the existence of your typical theistic God? I even said at the beginning of the argument that I didn't think that that God was provable. Greg, I have in my pocket evidence that the Bible is as valuable as our modern science books. And Greg says,
no, it's not.
All right, let the record show that Greg Brahe did not buy the farm on this one, he sold it. Do you view science as more valuable than philosophy, or vice versa, or is it a tie?
On a practical level, science is far more valuable to everyday life.
And without a good philosophy, we would not be able to invent all the technologies that we have. We would not be able to put our heads together and have better science, more accurate science.
Said that they're so interdependent that it's hard to separate the two, is that science is nothing without philosophy.
Actually, you began by saying that they were so different, I thought.
Philosophy itself, without science, is completely useless.
Both science and philosophy have very valuable practical applications.
Yes. So where are you going with this? How are you going to tie this into the Bible is then as valuable
before we
as
proceeded,
modern day science?
Okay, so today we have things like knives. They're very sharp. They can cut our meat efficiently.
Joey, I feel like I could save you some time in this if I were to just start attacking your position, letting you defend. Would you prefer that? Or to try to say that that is just as valuable in a utilitarian sense as science is borderline sociopathic. To throw out
Watch the
all
ad
of
hominems.
The evil.
We are going to continue this topic at least for a small amount of time next week. I may have been utterly defeated.
I'll have another topic ready to go right after that for next week. How's that sound?
What's it going to be?
I'd like to say, even specifically, the Bible is not as valuable as modern day theological texts that are written about the Bible.
We'll see you next week, in which we will continue the conversation. Is the Bible as valuable as our modern science books? And don't hate me, people. I have a point to make. Just stay tuned. Well, I think that about sums it up. Welcome to Clash Course. Good afternoon. My name is Joey Livingston, and my co-host Greg Brahe. How are you doing, Greg?
I am wonderful. I'm excited. That's my first time watching that previously clip or listening to it, and I was really excited that your knives point made it into there.
Yeah, well, that was the strongest point of the whole show, obviously. Sean put that together. He's the atheist with the motheist. It's what I just made up about him.
I call him that all the time, I'm sure.
Yeah, he really tears it up around here. And we thank him for that. Let's see. Greg, would you like to express your deep shame about anything that you just heard from the previously on clip there? Did you want to?
I don't know. I have to say it caught me a little bit with those clips and putting the juxtaposition of philosophy without science is useless, and then not like 3 seconds later, and the way it was cut was well, sure, philosophy and science both have practical application, so a direct contradiction there, busted. But I can clarify.
Are you suggesting that was magical editing that made you look that way?
Yes, because obviously I'm never wrong. So there must only have been a misinterpretation of what I was saying.
I love your irony. Can you turn him up on the house a little bit? I can't hear him very well. Say testing 1 2.
Testing 1 2.
Very good. Okay, well let's continue this discussion because I haven't yet been abused enough by the audience in my head, which I know which are all angry at me and yelling at me for what I'm trying to do here. So we were talking last week about I was going to make the argument, and I was making the argument that the Bible is as useful as our modern day science books. Is that the way I phrased it? I'm
yes.
trying to remember. Okay, all right. And you decided to stop me. I guess you thought I was grandstanding, and just show me how you understood exactly where I was going and exactly how I was wrong. And I will say that you did demonstrate that you knew where I was going. But I still am not. I still am not done.
Not ready to concede yet, huh?
No. I'm going to talk a little bit longer about it. You took a little bit of time tearing me down last week, so I'm going to speak a little bit more, and then you can speak a little bit more, and then we'll wrap it up and move on. We'll see how it goes. But I want to. I know we just had a recap, but just to get my momentum going here, I'm going to. Well, actually, let me just start here. This Wednesday, while you were ill, we had a cult of honesty, and I'm sweating, so I'm going to. We don't have makeup artists here that can powder our face, so I have a towel to help me with that. We had a particular discussion. I forget what the topic was. Does someone out in the audience remember what the topic of this week's discussion was? What is your moral compass? Right. And I made a comment at the end of the show that the more I stepped away from religion, the more that I looked at morality in almost in the same way that I look at technology. And I want to take that same metaphor and explain it again, perhaps better, as applied to the Bible and its usefulness compared to science books and their usefulness. And at this point in time, I am going to concede one point, which I have felt all along. I'm trying to make an argument not to say that the Bible is in every way more useful than science books, but I certainly want to make it seem that way, because how can we be controversial? So let me begin here. When the iPhone first came out, do you remember when the iPhone came out?
Like 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that.
It was more than that. It was four, maybe 5 years ago.
I try to avoid that cult.
Did you? Don't make fun of Apple. Did you ever watch the keynote?
No.
Okay. Steve Jobs walked out on stage, and it was one of the most legendary keynotes for those who are fans of keynotes ever. It was he was a rock star. He presented the iPhone. Before he even announced it, he said, "We're announcing 3 devices. We're announcing a portable internet browsing device, a brand new iPod, and a telephone." And he kept saying those over and over again, and people got really excited because they knew what was coming. And he said, "Do you get what I'm saying, people? I'm talking about one device, one single device." And the crowd went wild, and the whole world went wild buying the iPhone. And I don't know that most people these days, unless they try really hard, remember what it was like before the iPhone came around. And I know that there are people, probably like yourself, who are not iPhone fans. I know you have an Android device. But the Android phone would not exist, or arguably not exist, were it not for the iPhone pushing that technology forward. What do you think about that?
That's possible. I don't know enough about the juxtaposition of those two technological advances, I guess, to know if
one might say that somebody eventually would have made some real innovations with a smartphone. But whoever that person was, in our area of the multiverse, it was Apple. And once they did that, it got everybody rethinking the phone completely. And these days, we have phones that are much more fun to use, much more useful, and they are better in every way. And the iPhone was the beginning of that. And when it came out, everybody agreed. I mean, the consensus was that this device was great. It was wonderful. It was the answer to moving forward in the area of smartphones, and it was just constantly raved about. And then, after that, they came out with the iPhone 3G, and then the 3GS, and then the iPhone 4, and the iPhone 4S, and now we have the iPhone 5. And the iPhone 5, compared to the original iPhone, is light years ahead. It does possibly thousands of things that the first iPhone never did. And when you compare the two, no one would ever say that this first iPhone, that there is anything right about it in terms of choosing it over the other. Anybody would choose the new iPhone over the old iPhone. Its innovations make the old iPhone look all wrong. See what I'm saying?
I think I even see where you're going with this one, but carry on.
Sure. Well, I don't think it's a mystery anymore. The rabbit's out of the hat. But what I'm saying here is that as technology moves forward, old technologies look all wrong. And, by the way, they are all wrong. There is nothing right these days about using a 32-pin serial bus connector that came out in the 80s. It was great then. It's all wrong now. And you will ruin your business if you use that sort of connection for your computers, because your transfer speed will go at 1 kilobit per second or less. And nobody would hook up a 56K modem. It's all wrong. There's nothing right about those things these days. And so what I'm saying is that, like morality, or like the iPhone, morality and even the Bible had their place in time, and they were useful. The books in the Bible were useful to the people who they were written to just take a few steps forward. When we compare the morality that we have today in this civilization to the morality that is presented in the Bible, it is all wrong. But this was presented to a society. The Bible was not presented to us. It was not originally written to us. It was written to a society that was savage, that thought nothing about cutting down their neighbor if they pissed them off and ending their life. And the laws, which we consider to be so savage today, or at least I do, moved a society forward to the point to where they at least didn't kill their neighbors, to where they at least didn't murder their slaves at the drop of a hat, to where they at least didn't kill their women the moment that they pissed them off. And no, there isn't anything right about those concepts today, but back then it was just a few steps forward. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. And actually, I conceded that last week, that at the time that the manuscripts were written, there was certainly, or at least the driving force that caused the manuscripts to be written, the cultural changes, whatever they happen to be documenting, or if it was them themselves that did cause them. In either respect, yes, it was a revolutionary way of thinking at the time, but that, you just admitted yourself that it is outdated.
I do.
And it's bad at this point.
I do admit that. But I will say that it's still true that if you own a slave, you shouldn't kill them. But it's also true that you shouldn't own a slave. So we've taken several steps forward since then.
Well, let's be clear here, though. The Bible doesn't say you shouldn't kill them. You just shouldn't kill them too quickly.
No. It says that if the owner of a slave beats their slave, that as long as that slave is able to get up and walk in a few days, the owner is not to be punished. But if the slave dies, then the owner needs to be punished.
I understood it to be if an owner of a slave beats a slave and beats the slave to death, then that owner deserves to be punished. If, however, the owner beats the slave and the slave dies after a few days, then that's unavoidable and due to the weakness of the slave, basically.
No, I think I'm right. I'm right.
I'll concede you on that one until I can Google it.
Yeah. All right.
Speaking of Google, who do you prefer, Mark Twain or Albert Einstein?
Well, they both look quite similar. You're just asking me to randomly pick one. I will pick Einstein.
Einstein? All right. Well, the quote that I'm going to give you here then is from Albert Einstein. It says, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." I guess with that, I'm going to say, what is your punching point on this one? How is the Bible equally valuable or more valuable than
I didn't say it was more valuable. I didn't say it was more valuable.
I said equally or more.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Either.
So when viewed on a timeline, one day our modern science books will be as useless as the Bible is today. The technology and the knowledge that we will have about the universe and about science and about life will have progressed far enough to where nobody would ever open those books to learn about science.
So that's your punching point, is that they will both eventually be obsolete. And
yes, they both,
even though the Bible already is.
Both of them equally so had their time and place and usefulness in our society.
See, I cannot grant that as even being a valid argument in this case. I mean, by using the terms modern day, I think that gives the context that it's sort of a rolling scale. Whatever happens to be in the current modern time is modern day science books. I mean, if you said the science books of today,
but we are in the modern day. We are in the modern day.
That's true.
So I will rephrase it if it pleases you. The Bible and the Bible is as useful. The Bible of its day is as useful as the science books of its day.
I'm not sure what you mean by of its day now.
The Bible.
The Bible in the day it was.
The Bible in the day it was written was as useful as the science books in the day they were written, in the sense that they both move society forward a few steps at a time.
Well, that might be true, but that's not at all what we were.
Can we end the show now? I think I just won with that.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you won because you completely changed the question. No,
the
Bible.
I didn't change the question.
The question was the statement you were defending was that the Bible is equally useful to modern day science books. Would mean currently, would it not?
And in a sense, it is. It has its usefulness. It is useful in the history of mankind. Thank you. We will see you next week on Clash Course.
Well, do you remember the other topic, the one that I had gone on to offer then? Since you're obviously conceding that one, I think it might be time we move on to my argument that the Bible is not even as useful as modern day theological texts about the Bible.
You know what? First of all, I am arguing in a historical sense, and that was what I had in my pocket. Now you are wanting to argue in a non-historical sense, and boy, won't that be fun! Gosh, I just got to say, Dr. Jones is in the audience, and he is chomping at the bit with everything that's said. He really wants to be up here. Oh, I love him. So
I can only assume it's to relieve you of your duty here.
Now, the joy of my role on this show is to tell you that I have something in my pocket that you could not possibly believe were true, and then painfully struggle through an hour or more worth of dialogue to wear you out until you at least stop talking.
But until I concede that in this weird, obscure way of viewing this through 16 different warped mirrors, it could be understood to mean what you're saying. Is that what
you're being unfair?
You're right. I may have exaggerated, been a touch hyperbolic about the number of mirrors and the shape of them, but I think I didn't quite give enough credit to the smoke.
I don't claim to have proved you wrong in the way that you were thinking. I only claim to have made you think about it in a different way. You can quote that and put it at the beginning of all of our shows. Now, but what I'm saying is that you are now saying that you have something in your pocket that I think I completely agree with. I mean, you're not enticing me to say, oh yes, I will, you're making me angry with your statement. I think that there are lots of modern theological books that are more useful than the Bible. And I feel the pressing disappointment from my father in the audience. I think he wants me to take this argument up, but I don't see a rational approach. I'll tell you this. The point of Clash Course is to allow other people to come up and take our positions.
This is true.
And so I probably shouldn't do this now because I don't want to put him on the spot, but I will talk with Dr. Jones and see if he wants to take that argument. But I don't see any rational way through that. Modern theological books are more useful than the Bible, and that is going to be the position that you take. And so you want me to say no, they are not as useful. Okay, I will take that. I'll take that argument. I think I can twist your arm on that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So the case that I'm going to make today is that the Bible is, frankly, the Bible is useless, but the modern day theological texts have slightly more use than the Bible does in that respect. I'm not granting either of them a large degree of use, but the reason that I'm bringing this up is given the context of our last, if you could call that a debate, the discussion about the Bible being equally useful to modern day science texts. I think your approach in eventually saying that it's going to be, or that our modern day science text will be equally useless as the Bible currently is, almost made this point for me. But the goal I really had in this one was to display how useless the Bible truly is, and how use is something that happens with a modern context. This is why I'm going to make the claim once again that modern day theological texts are more useful than the Bible, even if they are about the Bible. My reason for saying that is because, as you pointed out in our last show, and I think we both agreed on, philosophy is useful in many ways. It's also inspirational. It can be applicable in some contexts, and philosophy is just like any other human endeavor, a growing endeavor. It is not something that is static. It's fluid. It evolves with time, and it builds on itself.
Science is completely useless without philosophy. Sorry, I just want to throw that in there because you said the exact opposite last week, and I just thought it would be fun to make that claim. Go ahead.
Well, actually, that's equally true in that respect. Once again, they're interdependent. If we had zero philosophy, then we would have zero logic, because logic is a branch of philosophy. And
can we replay that previously on Clash Course clip? Go ahead.
Once again, contradicting myself.
I'm being rude.
But yes, the philosophy without science is useless, and science without philosophy is equally useless. They're interdependent. How's that?
Thank you.
So, I guess what I'm getting at here, the reason that modern day theological texts are more useful than the Bible, even especially if they're based on the Bible, is because they've grown. They've taken the context of the last 2,000 years of human history, all the things that we've experienced, learned, and changed. And for the most part, I'll grant you some of them just deny that most of that happened, but for the most part, they have evolved into a way that has encompassed much more humanism and egalitarian, and just so many different philosophies that have been inspired by the Far East, other religious traditions, cultural traditions, have all sort of been amalgamated into the new theologies about the Bible. And I guess I can't make that as an absolute blanket statement, because there are, depending on how you choose your text, completely useless ones out there. But I really cannot see how anybody could disagree with the statement that modern day theological texts are more useful than than the Bible itself is.
All right, I disagree.
I didn't say that nobody could. I just said I don't understand how anybody could. So please explain.
Well, Greg, if you are nothing else on this show, you are certainly succinct. Succinct. Is that how you say that word? Succinct? Thank you.
I think it's succinct. It's sounding
well. When I say it about you, can I say succinct?
Like a dirty tattoo in my mind.
Oh, no, I wasn't saying that.
Okay.
Don't make this into a nasty show. Okay, so I disagree, and I'm going to once again play the historical card here. And I'm going to point out that once again, the Bible had its use in its day. In the day of the Bible, science did not exist in the mind of humanity, or if it did, it was so much different as to not even be called science. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay. So my position in the last argument was, and always was, that the Bible had its usefulness, not just because it moved people a few steps forward, but that it, in a sense, filled the void where science wasn't. People didn't understand science. They didn't understand the scientific method. They didn't understand all of the things that even most of your simplest minds understand today about science. And so and so religion or the Bible filled a void in moving people forward and at least trying to understand life and at least trying to understand the world around them that science had not yet been present to fill. I don't know whether you agree with that or not, but that was the position I was arguing. Would you agree with that?
I think that's a very anthropologically correct statement. That
okay.
Religion in general, not necessarily just the Bible, but religion seems to be across the board a fantastic example of how human curiosity will find answers to the questions that drive us, even if the question or the answers are basically coming out of ignorance.
Sure.
So,
well, I appreciate you giving me a nod on that point. What I would say is that the Bible inevitably, and well before science had its enormous footprint in this world, the Bible reached an enormous audience, and made all kinds of it affected all kinds of people across the globe before science had any place in the mind of people. It and I'm speaking in the context of thousands of years ago, that some of the books in the Bible were here, and they were moving people forward in the way that possibly the way that the author intended. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
Okay. So my question to you is, in that same historical sense, in that same reach, in that same moving forward, when you compare the modern day theological books, what would you say that the reach of even the most popular theological books is? Theological book. What would you say that the reach of even your most popular theological book about the Bible is? Do you think it even fractionally approaches the target or the audience that the Bible reached?
I don't know. It depends, I guess, what you mean by, or what you count as a theological book. Of course, some pop culture books wax into theology quite a bit, but there certainly is also an argument to be said that if we're looking at it in a historical context, the Bible at the time it was written reached almost nobody, versus the amount of people that basically any published book reaches
but
today.
you can't win this argument based on some guess or prophecy about how far any theological book will reach. And the point that I'm making is that the Bible moved enormous amounts of people forward at least one or two steps, whereas even your most popular theological book has yet to be shown to move, maybe more than 1 million people forward, much at all, because most of it is rehashing what the Bible said. It is modern interpretations, yes, but you're talking about people who are simultaneously being reached by science. And their mind is being influenced by science, and they're more likely to take any positive steps forward because of science, not because of theological books. And I would think surely you would agree to that point. And so the usefulness of religious books has taken a huge backseat since the time that the Bible had its usefulness, to the point to where, in comparison to the presence of science, they have almost no ability to move people forward at this point in time.
If we're going to talk about history here, I want to bring you back to September 13th of 1998. That was
the camera just caught a smug smile on my face. I thought it was only fair that you know that. Sorry about that.
All right.
I didn't know the camera was going to show me.
There was an interview with a man named William, in which he very famously or infamously said, it depends on what the meaning of the word is. And I feel like that's what this conversation is going to hinge upon here. Is we keep, as you said right away, you want to argue it from a historical position, and I can't make that argument. That I could not even begin to say that any theological text written today will have the impact in any sense that the Bible did through the last 2,000 years of its history.
Sure.
Especially if I'm not allowed to look forward for the next 2,000 years in sort of a presumptive manner. So you're right. There's no way I could argue that. But I am not trying to argue that. I'm trying to argue about today.
Sure.
The usefulness of these books today. And
sure.
Today, the Bible is, well, as we've talked about in the past on other shows, and the New Covenant group talks about all the time, most people don't even know what the hell the Bible says.
Look, Greg,
and there's all kinds of competing translations out there. So if we want to talk about the usefulness of the Bible in today's world, it's essentially as close to zero as one could get. I mean, yes,
sure.
People may take inspiration from the Bible because they happen to have it and do so, and there are things in there that are inspirational, but that doesn't mean that that'd be the only source of similar inspiration. And
sure.
That's what I mean. The modern day theological text, if people were to just discard the Bible entirely and read modern day theological texts that are about the Bible and yet encompass the history of the last 2,000 years into them, they would be better off
sure.
for it.
Well, listen, Greg, don't get angry. Don't get mad about this. Just realize that I'm just trying to make the show interesting here. I knew where you're coming from the beginning. You're not as shady as I am when you begin your arguments. So I was just kind of doing the reverse, just taking it to another place, and I realize that we're coming from two different perspectives, and you agree with what I'm saying about its historical usefulness. It was far more useful in its day than the theological books of today are. But if you put them both in the modern day, well, I don't know. Let's try this again. Let's put them both in the modern day. Okay? Let's take another stab at it. You ready?
So I want to ask then, if we're going to put them both in the modern day, are we still going to allow the historical context of the Bible, or would it be as if both were published today?
No.
That'd be kind
of
both
are published. It is
no, I mean published today only.
No.
And we're not published in the past.
No.
Okay.
We must admit to the truth that the Bible was published in the past, but we will throw out the usefulness that it had in the past.
Okay.
Let's see how much time we have left. How much time do we have left?
About 10 minutes.
About 10, 15 minutes? Okay. All right. I think that we can do this. Okay. So most of your modern day commentaries probably not all, but most of them, are written based on what text, would you say? English?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. So none of them are actually written about the Bible. Thank you. I won that one again. That was quick. Gosh.
I didn't say that they had to be. I just said even if they are.
Okay. But they are written about translations of the Bible, and what I'm getting at here is that even in the modern day, both the Bible and modern theological books, okay, at least the Bible, and I'm talking about the text as far back as we can find, the original texts, at least they speak as authoritatively as they possibly can about what the author actually said. And as we move away from those texts into the world of English, we move eons past what the original author actually said in the Bible. And some of it, this is something that I keep repeating, and I keep repeating it because Dr. Jones keeps repeating it, that until we have a really thorough conversation about what the original authors actually said, we still exist in this state of potential surprise as to whether we're even having remotely the same conversation as it is in the English. And
is this going to launch into like the Bible code here? Is there
dirty atheists like yourself keep making the statement that it doesn't matter, and that you are talking to fundamentalists who are coming from the English. I'm so sorry I called you dirty. I feel horrible at this point.
That's actually pretty accurate. I don't bathe anymore.
Okay, good. All right. So, but you keep making arguments along with me, along with Dr. Jones. We don't disagree that what the English says is crazy. Most of it is insanity, but we haven't yet given enough ear, in my opinion, to what the original authors actually said, and whether these English versions are even the same book, or whether we have gone so far away from the original intent of the authors because of religious dogma, of men just wanting it to be certain ways, to have their way, to usurp women, to have slaves, to dominate other countries in some form of self-righteousness. If there hasn't been so much bias over the past thousands of years to take us away from the author's original intention, that not to argue that they are right in the modern day, but that maybe they might have been saying something entirely different. And until we have modern theological books that accurately write about the intention of the original authors, they are not useful in talking about the Bible. They are not more useful in talking about the Bible than the Bible is, because they're not yet talking about the Bible.
Well, once again, I didn't say that they were useful in talking about the Bible. I just said even if they talk about the Bible, they're more useful in general.
Okay,
and
very good. But again, we haven't yet made an accurate comparison until we have theological books that do actually represent the author's original intention, or until we have that conversation about what those authors' original intention actually was. You can't make that comparison.
That might be true. However, I think that again, I have to appeal to the most generally accepted definitions, and currently the most generally accepted definition of the Bible means the modern day translations that are extant. Even if those aren't extremely accurate to the intentions of the original authors, it still is what it is, and that's the text I was attempting to compare it to, not necessarily the original manuscripts. However,
there was a day, Greg, there was a day when modern science defined the world as flat, and Galileo got murdered because he was the only person saying it was wrong. And I'm telling you that usage that you're using is only valid because it is common, but it is not right. You can call these English texts this book of Paul, you can say, well, we're just going to go by it. But these books claim that they accurately represent the original text, and that's a lie.
I'm not concerned about whether or not their claims are accurate. For me, the name Bible is a label that applies in a cultural context to these texts that exist in multiple translations, multiple iterations, some having more books than others. It's not a particular concern of mine as to exactly what books the Bible contains or what translation it is, because even if we had the original or the original manuscripts, the ones actually penned by the authors or the closest down the line from the author, even if we had the authors standing here in front of us just reciting these things to us, and we're here for us to pick their brains and ask them about it, I'm still going to argue that they are far less useful than modern day theological texts, because theology and philosophy builds on itself.
You almost had me, because as you were talking, I said to myself, well, we didn't define what Bible meant at the beginning, and I knew we hadn't, and I let that go because I thought it would be fun. And now here Greg is turning around to me and saying it's perfectly valid for me to define the Bible as the English text. But then you went on to make the statement that even if those original authors stood before us and recited what they actually said, that what they had to say would still not be as useful as modern theological texts. And I am back to the place where I say, Greg, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, I will have to grant that to some extent. I'm arguing out of ignorance, because it's possible that these people, that these shepherds and barely literate individuals from 2,000 years ago had some sort of profound theological knowledge that has been lost to time. But I think that the odds of that, just going by Occam's razor here, are terrifically bad. Okay. And therefore, I will confidently still stand by my assumption that even if those people were standing here telling us these things, it wouldn't be that different from having, let's say Aristotle standing here telling us exactly what he thought. Yes, right. At the time, Aristotle made some extremely profound advances to the field of philosophy and even to the science of his day, natural philosophy. But we've built on it from there. Even if we had Charles Darwin standing right here telling us everything about his voyage on the Beagle and about all of the different things he's documenting, showing us his ideas with all of the passion that Darwin had as he discovered these things, it would still be less useful than the evolution book that I have sitting on a shelf that I just moved out from behind me so I can't grab it.
Okay.
Because the things that we have today are familiar with the past. They're aware of it, and they've built on it with more and more context in that, or has been added to it over time.
Okay, but we have the founder of the New Covenant group, Dr. Jones, a linguist, sitting here saying over and over again that our modern translations are highly unaware of the past, that they have lost their way, that they are in many ways completely different texts, and now I have an atheist and an evangelist of science standing in front of me, or sitting in front of me in his black Dr. Evil room, saying that he doesn't know what the original authors say, but he's still going to stand by this position that he can make some sort of valid comparison here, and say it must be better because it's new. That's what you're saying. It must be better because it's new.
I'm not saying it must be better because it's new. I'm saying
that's what it sounded like to me.
It's better. It's almost certain that they had not come up with anything at that time, 2,000 years ago, in the state of relative ignorance that they had culturally and scientifically, that has not been extrapolated and expounded upon many, many, many times by now. And I honestly think that the musings of the average teenager on theology,
that's probably true. Probably true. But I'm stating to you that there's a real possibility that our modern theological books are based upon concepts that have taken 1,000 steps backward since Paul the Apostle spoke his words. We're running out of time. Do you have any closing statements to make?
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I had to say was when I said theology in this context, I did try to say even if they're based on the Bible, or if they're, or I'm sorry, even if they're about the Bible, because when I say theology, I'm trying to appeal again to the to use the dictionary here, the study of the nature of God and religious belief. And theology is a very broad field. It's a subset of philosophy that goes very much into morality and ethics, a lot about the meanings to life, the big questions, the metaphysical realm. And most of modern day theology books are not necessarily, well, they may be written by Christians, they may be inspired by some Christian teaching, but I think most of them are very much a spiritually enlightened, I know it's weird as an atheist to say that, position compared to that which
someone whose soul is dead has no place in judging the spiritual value of things.
It's true. It makes it very difficult for me. But I look at the cultural and historical context in which the Bible was written and say that it's absurd to believe that there were couple dozen individuals living between 1700 and 3500 years ago that had any sort of philosophical viewpoint of the world that would be anything other than quaint and
is the work of
backwards
Socrates
today.
more valuable than the work of our modern theological books?
No.
What about Plato? What about Aristotle?
These ones, I'd actually argue that, yeah, because they just have so much more practical usage.
So you're arguing there are exceptions? You're arguing there are
because
exceptions?
I'm talking about theology compared to theology. I'm going to say that logical philosophy,
Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, they weren't struggling with theology in their day?
Well, they were to some extent, but the other parts of their works were the basics of logic and reason. And that's extremely useful in comparison to just about any theological book that's ever been written.
We have philosophers, like Paul was a philosopher, okay? But I'm going to take him out of the equation for a moment. I'm going to say we have philosophers like these guys who were struggling with theology. And in many senses, they were struggling to do away with ignorant ideas. But that is a theological struggle. We're out of time. I want to have the last word here, and I want to say, and turn to the camera that I can look straight at, please. I want to take a moment to express thankfulness for my friend Greg. I beat him up all the time, and I know you think I'm making a brag right now, but I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. He is an atheist, and I have so much fun teasing him and beating him up and insulting him, and he takes it every step of the way. He's a wonderful sport. And in this argument, this argument is unwinnable for me. All I can make is poignant statements because if you want to open the category of theology books to all religions, well, that's a long argument. I don't know that I could win it. And there are possibly books even written in the day of the Bible that are more valuable in that regard. I don't know, but I hope this has been a stimulating discussion for you. And Greg, I hope you had fun.
I did.
All right. Do you have 2 more words before we close?
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you next week.